In this video, we will discuss how to solve an unstructured consulting case. So the question is, our client is a major US airline. The CEO is now considering a new policy to allow pets to travel with their owners in the main cabin. How would you analyze this and what would you recommend them? By the way, this is a free video. Please find the link for the entire course on how to crack any consulting interview in the description below. As usual, we'll start by asking clarifying questions. Please pause the video for 1 minute and think of all the clarifications that you want to get. So I will start by asking what is the client's objective, right? See, is it increasing revenue or is it enhancing customer service or the loyalty among pet owners or staying competitive with other airlines or just attracting a new segment of travelers? So the interviewer tells us that the client wants to increase revenue by attracting a new segment of travelers. Another important thing to understand is when we are saying pets, what pets will be allowed. So the interviewer tells us that mostly we can consider cats and dogs. And I would also like to know what is the current state, like if pet owners want to carry pets, how does it work? So the interviewer tells us that historically the flights have only allowed pets to travel in the cargo hold. And it is also important to understand like how will this all function, right? So are we planning to have separate seating for people traveling with and without a pet? So the interviewer tells us that yes, people with pet will have a separate seating section isolated from the ones without pet. And my next question is like what all routes is the client considering? So the interviewer tells us that we can focus on the domestic flights in US for now. As for the international routes, they might have some strict regulations, right? And finally, I would also like to understand what is the competitive landscape like. So what is it that our main competitors are doing? Are they also allowing pets in the cabin? So the interviewer tells us that no, this is first of its kind and our client wants to tap into this opportunity and get the first mover advantage. Let me know in the comments if there are other clarifying questions that we could have asked. So, just to quickly summarize what all we have discussed till now, our client, who is a major US airline, is considering allowing pets, mainly cats and dogs, to travel with their owners in the main cabin on domestic US flights. And the goal is to increase revenue and attract a new segment of travelers who prefer to travel with their pets. And our client is seeking to gain a first mover advantage and to address any potential passenger concerns. They're also planning to have a separate seating sections for travelers with and without pets. So, our task is to analyze the feasibility of this new policy and provide a recommendation to the CEO. I hope you are with me till here. So, now talking about how do we approach this? See, the way I'm thinking about this is the major question is should we allow pets or not, right? So, the first thing to do is to understand like how big is this opportunity, right? And is it worth pursuing or not? So here we will start with market sizing to find if the market is attractive enough or not, right? And then if we find out that the market size is attractive, the next step is to assess if the client is suitably positioned to grab this opportunity, which will include looking at the client's capabilities, both external and internal. And finally, if the client is suitably positioned, then we would go about designing how we can fulfill this opportunity. So there we will look at, how should we go to the market, what should be our implementation strategy, and things like that. Let's start with the first step, which is opportunity analysis or gauging how big is the market. See here, I'm going to do a quick market sizing in terms of revenue for our client. So the way in which I'm thinking about the annual revenue for our clients, if they are allowing pets, this can be determined by the number of flights that they have in per year times the number of pets per flight times the average fees per pet, right? So let's see if we need to determine all the factors or we can ask the interviewer if we have any information on these factors. So let's say the interviewer asks us to determine the first one. And the way I'm thinking about this is see, we have to determine the number of flights that take off from one airport, and then maybe we can extrapolate it to the number of flights that our client operates. So we'll start with the total hours in the day and then we'll divide it into peak hours and non-peak hours. Now, since I'm considering a major airport in US, I'm assuming that the airport is operational 24 by 7. But it can also happen that if it's a small airport, then there could be some non-operational hours as well. The next thing that we need to find out is what is the runway throughput for each of this. And this is nothing but the average number of takeoffs and landing that a runway can handle in a given period. And then post that, what we'll do is we'll determine how many flights are taking off and landing. So using the hours of operation, the runway throughput, and the number of runways, we can determine that. And finally, we'll do the same for the non-peak hours as well. And then we can take the average and determine how many flights are taking off. So let me quickly plug in the numbers and it will make it clear on how we are doing it. There are 24 hours in a day. One third is the peak hour and the remaining two third is the non-peak hour. So that gives us 8 hours and 16 hours respectively. Now talking about the runway throughput. So here I'm assuming that for the peak hours, the throughput will be definitely high, and this makes sense intuitively also. So assuming the runway throughput is 20 per hour for peak hours, which means that every 3 minutes a flight is taking off or landing, right? And assuming that it is 10 per hour for non-peak hours, which again means that every 6 minutes a flight is taking off or landing. So the total number of flights that are taking off or landing in peak hours comes out to be 800, and here I've considered the number of runways as 5. And then same for non-peak hours, that also comes out to be 800. So to determine the total number of flights, what we'll do is we'll take a simple average of the two, and hence we are able to get close to 800 flights. Please pause the video for a minute and just eyeball all the calculations. Here, one assumption that I've taken is that the number of runways are 5. So now, assuming that there are 10 such major airports in US and our client has 20% market share, right? So the total number of flights for our client which are taking off, this will come out to be close to 1600 flights per day. So on to the next step. We know the flights per year, assuming that our client is operating, on all the 365 days. So we can find the flights per year. Now for the next factor, so we'll quickly ask the interviewer, and the interviewer tells us that the client wants to restrict to 6 pets per flight. And we can also assume that on an average, there'll be 50% utilization, which means that only 50% of such seats will be booked. And the average fees for per pet will be close to $150, which our client is planning to charge. So based on this, the annual revenue comes out to be close to $262.8 million. If you've liked my explanation till now, please subscribe to our channel Techno Managers and you'll find a lot of consulting and product management interviews as we keep posting new questions every week. So, see, while the interviewer has asked us to stop here, one more important step could be to determine if the market size is attractive or not. And one way in which I'm thinking about this is, see, the client's goal is to increase the revenue, right? So, we can compare the revenue that our client is making from some other ancillary service to with this one to see if this is at par. And obviously, in real life, the client will have to also do a cost benefit analysis to see how the margins are coming out, right? And if the margins are significant or not. So, for now, assuming that the market is attractive, the next step is to understand how our client is positioned to pursue this opportunity, right? So here, let's say I'll start with a quick external analysis, which is to look at how the external situation looks like, right? And here I'm breaking it down into factors like political, legal, economic, social, technological, and environmental. This is the general PESTLE approach that we use. So that is what I'm leveraging here. So now talking about political or legal factors, see, one thing is that our client needs to ensure that they are compliant with the government's aviation regulation, and this could be related to safety and transportation of animals, or even the way in which animals can travel in flight, right? So one thing that our client needs to ensure is that they are working with all the relevant bodies and ensuring that they are compliant, right? And maybe they can also appoint a legal personnel so that if there are any legal situations that arise, the legal personnel can handle them. And now talking about the economic factors, there will definitely be increased cost because there'll be, staff training required. There'll be a different customer service required. There'll be enhanced cleaning and things like that, right? So what our client should do is first run pilot on some routes to gauge what is it that the cost is looking up like, right? Before they are doing a full rollout. And then talking about the social factors. So one is that while it is attracting the pet travelers, it can also detract the non-pet travelers because people could have some allergies or maybe animal fear. One good thing that our client is doing is that they are implementing separate pet and non-pet zones, but still they need to monitor the social sentiment closely. And not talking about the technological stuff, so it can happen that our client's booking system is not working properly or the technology is not in place. For example, they need to make sure that all their platforms are upgraded so that they are able to include this new feature of travel with pet. Before they start with a rollout, they need to conduct extensive testing of all their digital platforms so that there's no glitch that's happening. And then talking about the last factor, which is environment, there'll be new kind of waste disposal systems required because there'll be increased waste from the pet related products. So here what our client can do is they can partner with animal welfare organizations and design biodegradable ways so that they can minimize the environmental impact and not face any backlash. So now that we've looked at the external factors and we've identified all the risks, we have the solutions for them. So let's look at what are the internal factors and see how our client is placed there. Starting with what is it that our client finds as their strength. So our client already has a strong brand recognition. They have a large customer base because, as we mentioned, they are a major airline, right? And by leveraging this new offering, our client can definitely be a first mover in bringing pets to the main cabin. And this will also provide the ability for our client to command a premium pricing because they are the first ones to offer this. Now, talking about the weaknesses, see, there could be some weakness because obviously this is a new strategy and this will increase the operational complexity related to staff training, logistics, cleaning, and things like that. And it can also potentially alienate the non pet travelers because they might be feeling discomfort or any allergies that they could have. So, this can also lead to some revenue loss. Now, again, as I mentioned, one good thing that our client is doing is they are introducing separate seating section for pet owners and non-pet owners. So this weakness can somehow be mitigated. Now the next thing is what opportunity does this bring? See, this is definitely going to help the client capture the new and growing customer segment of pet parents and also build a differentiated pet friendly brand positioning for itself. In fact, in the future, the client can also explore partnerships with pet brands and animal welfare groups. And this can be a revenue source also because they can advertise the pet brands and pet products inside. This can also provide positive PR and social media buzz, right? Because they are the first ones to do this. Finally, talking about some of the potential threats, see, there could be negative reactions also from the customers who are allergic, or if some incidents happen, then it can cause bad PR very easily. And the other thing is, if other airlines also copy the same, then our client can lose the first mover advantage. There are some operational risks, like let's say if some accidents happen, then all of these could lead to reputation damage. So that's where our client needs to make sure that they are implementing strict safety protocols. So the interviewer tells us that we've done a comprehensive analysis here, and while there are threats and challenges, our client sees this as a great opportunity and is willing to pursue it. So now, given that our client wants to pursue it, the next step is how do we implement this strategy? See, one easy way in which I'm thinking about this is we draw out the customer journey. Like, what are the different stages and what is it that our client needs to implement in each of them? So, the first thing is definitely booking and seat selection. So, here our client needs to make sure that they are clearly calling out all the pet policy guidelines, and they need to also enable an add-on option for pet like their documents, their vaccination certificates, information like their height and weight, or any other details, so that people are able to provide all those details upfront and see if their pets qualify for travel or not. And then they also need to enable people to find the seats which are designed for the people who are traveling with pets. The next thing is pre flight onboarding. So here, the users should be able to generate a boarding pass or tag for the pet. And the client might also want to set up inspection by ground staff to ensure that the pet policy guidelines of, let's say, size, medical conditions, or vaccinations, those are being followed. And then the next step, which will be in flight. So here, the crew training becomes super critical because the crew members are the ones who will be handling any medical emergencies, and there should be a clear protocol on how they do all the cleaning post the flight lands and before the next set of passengers on board. There could be other things like how do we capture their feedback after the flight has landed so that we're able to see how this is working. So now finally, how do we go to the market? First of all, we need to determine who are our target customers. So our primary target will be all the pet owning households, especially the affluent and frequent travelers. And then the second is what is it that we are offering? So our core value proposition is that we are enabling travel together stress free with your pets. And we are also enabling dedicated zones to make sure that the pet and non pet passengers both are satisfied and they are comfortable, right? And we also need to provide training to our cabin crew and on ground staff on animal welfare, emergency handling, or any conflicts if they arise. And finally, how do we do it? See, the idea is to start small, launch the policy as a pilot on a few routes, and then determine success matrix. This could be like, for example, of the seats that we have designated for people with pet, how many of them are getting utilized? And then what is the customer satisfaction score? How many incidents are coming in? And we need to carefully track all these metrics and define certain thresholds for acceptance before we go for a large scale rollout. We can also partner with pet brands and animal welfare organizations so that we are able to boost the rollout credibility. And finally, we can also onboard some famous celebrities or influencers who are pet parents as brand ambassador, and this will again help us boost the credibility. We are at the end of the case, and it's time to provide the final recommendation to our client. So, what is it that they can do in the short term first? See, they should start with a pilot launch, and then they can introduce the service on certain high demand domestic routes with well defined eligibility, safety, seating policies, and things like that. And they need to definitely invest in staff training. That is the most important step. And upgrade all the cleaning protocols, implement dedicated pet zones, and things like that. These are all non negotiable. And then they need to also collect real time feedback from both pet and non pet travelers, monitor any incidents that are happening or what are the complaints that are coming and how is it that the sentiment is in the social media. And finally, in the long term, if the pilot is successful, then we should consider scaling up and expanding to additional domestic routes. And we can also work towards establishing our airline as a market leader in pet friendly travel, right? And this can be via partnerships with pet brands or other organizations. And the most important thing is the loop for feedback, right? That should never stop because even in the long run, the client needs to continuously improve their offering using customer feedback and keep upgrading their technology. So, we are at the end of the case. You can follow me on LinkedIn as I keep posting a lot of articles about consulting and business strategy. And I would also like to quickly share our list of books on strategy, consulting, and guesstimates which are super useful for anyone preparing for strategy or consulting roles. Please find the link in the description. I hope you've learned something new from this video. I will meet you in the next one. Till then, keep learning and keep watching.